Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name is Derik, and today we are getting into another spicy deck tech from Double Masters. I feel like Double Masters is just the graveyard of half-built decks that I've just left and tapped out and forgotten about, because all these commanders I've sort of half-built and then came back and forth with over the years that I kind of just never actually put the effort in to finish. They're all in Double Masters, and they're all staring at me to finally go ahead and finish it. That was the case with Bosh last week. That's the case with this week's commander, which is none other than the Scarab God. Now, if you like any of the cards in this deck or any of the crazy directions you can take the Scarab God, because it is a pretty flexible commander, go ahead and head over to TCG Player. TCG Player is amazing. Any cards you need, anything like foiling, any random arts, any printings, whatever it is of a card, TCG Player will have it. Any cards you get with the affiliate link down below in the description will help support the channel. We really do appreciate the help. So jumping right back into the Scarab God. The Scarab God is a 3, a blue, and a black for a 5/5 God that has some really interesting abilities. It has the Hour of Devastation God ability, where when it dies, it comes back to your hand at the end of the turn, meaning for the most part, you can dodge commander attacks, which in a greenless deck is absolutely huge. And I love that for the Hour of Devastation gods. They're all greenless and all have this text. It helps make up for not having the ramp that green gives you, which is really cool. You also have a couple other big abilities that can help take you in a direction. Now, the first ability is the one that kind of takes you in this zombie tribal direction. And that's at the beginning of your upkeep. Each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control, taking into account that the Scarab God himself is not a zombie. Now, the next ability is my favorite ability, and that's the reanimation part, and that's 2, a blue and a black, to go ahead and exile a creature from any graveyard, and then you make a token copy that's also a 4/4 black zombie.
You a zombie.
Now, the directions that are most common for this, I would say the most common by far is going to be a zombie tribal build. That most of the times where I see the Scarab God, it is zombie tribal, and that's actually not the direction I wanted to go in today. Zombie tribal is super cool, super fun. It's a deck that a little bit builds itself, and I wanted to get a little bit creative with some of the card choices in here. There were some non-zombies that really seemed like they'd be a lot of fun, so I wanted to take it more of a control shell. There's also other builds. You can do a secret commander is actually great with the Hour of Devastation gods because of that coming back to your hand. And so secret commander with this card is super fun because you can sneak it into a 3-4 color deck to get access to more cards. And if you want to be really sneaky and really secretive, run the invocation version of the card, then your opponents can't even read it to tell what it does. But like I mentioned, those aren't the directions I'm going to go for this deck tech. The direction I want to go is kind of a mill control build that really utilizes the reanimation to get value throughout the game and take advantage of that ability. I don't so much want to fill my graveyard with terrifying threats and Jin-Gataxiuses and It That Betrays and reanimate them and just terrify everyone. I kind of want to be taking other people's stuff.
You a zombie.
You know how much, or I would assume that y'all know how much I love Villainous Wealth by now, but if you don't, I really like Villainous Wealth, and I kind of look at this deck as like a weird mini version of that, where you kind of just pick and choose and steal the coolest things from everyone's graveyard to try to assemble really awesome board states. But yeah, long story short, we want to be able to mill everybody, including ourselves, get some big threats in the graveyards, control the big threats with our answers that we run, and kind of pick and choose awesome cards to reanimate throughout the game.
You a zombie.
And one of the biggest reasons I did want to go with this build of the deck is when you go zombie tribal with the Scarab God, it becomes terrifying very fast. Once you start to build up your board state and get an engine going, people see you as the biggest threat because they immediately see, okay, every turn I'm taking X amount of damage or losing X amount of life because there's this many zombies in play. It makes Scarab God target number 1. Well, and it's already threatening enough. Whereas if you go with this sort of build, you kind of pick and choose and get value throughout the game as opposed to just trying to be like, look how scary I am, please don't kill me, please don't try to do anything to stop me. If you go with this build, you'll have more of an opportunity to kind of lay low and pick your spots as opposed to just going all in on board, which is kind of the style I like to play more. Now, jumping into the creatures, I know I said I didn't want to go zombie tribal, and that doesn't mean you should ignore that text on the card. I think anytime you can get cool effects or really efficient zombie producing effects, you might as well throw them into the deck. Something like a Grave Titan is just an amazing card in basically any deck you can put it in, so why not just throw Grave Titan in, because then you can get those zombies, it's still a good value card, and then you just so happen to be able to scry and drain people for life. Or something like a Newscraft Mob, which is one of my favorite cards, period. Newscraft Mob is crazy because you can just flood the board with zombies. It's an easy way to fill the board, at the very least with some chump blockers, or you can get your value with your commander. To me, zombie token producers in this deck are much more important than the traditional playing zombie lords and all those synergies. We got other cards that take care of kind of the power part of the deck. Really just big token producers like these are awesome. And then we'll also want to fit some pretty solid mill in our creature category because there's some pretty awesome mill creatures. Something like a Dreamboard Muse is so powerful, and if anybody gets a little too trigger happy drawing too many cards, it can punish them for that. One of Sed's favorites is Consuming Aberration. For whatever reason, every time I see Sed get this card out, somehow everyone ends up copying it, and it just gets out of control. I don't know why. But there's never just one Consuming Aberration, and in this case, that's a good thing for you if that happens, because then you just have all of the reanimation targets.
You a zombie.
But even just one, it does work. The card does work, and it especially punishes decks that don't run enough lands, which is something I love to do. So this is a really powerful card, and it's just, for the mana you're paying, the effect it can have throughout the game is just super powerful. One of my favorite creatures in the deck is going to be Dream Eater, though, because this works as, 1, it is removal. It can bounce a creature. 2, it's a flying instant speed blocker, which are always important. And then 3, you can surveil and mill yourself. This is a really underrated card. I love this. I played this in my Tassiger deck. I really try to put this in whatever deck I can, because that triple threat right there, if you have any sort of Graveyard Matters deck at all, this card should be in it. I just love it. Artifacts are super simple in this deck. You want ramp. You just put all the mana rocks you can get. It's not super important which ones, to be super honest. We just want a lot of mana rocks, preferably 2-drop mana rocks. As many 2-drop mana rocks as you can get is the best, because that allows us to get our setup quick. We don't want to be ramping super late, and especially because our commander can avoid commander attacks, stuff like a Gilded Lotus or a Thran Dynamo is a little just bit too slow for the deck. So 2-drop mana rocks are perfect. Just kind of fill them all in here. Now, besides mana rocks, we also have a lot of mill within our artifact category, and some of our best mill cards. So Altar of Dementia, Altar of the Brood, one of my favorites, Mind Crank, are all in this category. Really powerful cards that can just kind of incidentally mill people throughout the game. Altar of Dementia is especially good in this deck because it works as a sack outlet. And I didn't go super heavy on sack outlets, and maybe that was a mistake, but sack outlets are really powerful with the Scarab God to make sure that he never gets exiled, to make sure it is death, so that he goes to the graveyard and you get it back at end of turn. So that's something to keep in mind. If you notice whatever god you're playing keeps getting exiled, sack outlets are a good way to kind of get around that. And a card that is finally being reprinted is Mesmeric Orb. I've been waiting for this reprint for forever. It is finally here. I'm hoping the price tanks, because there's a few decks I want this in. Now this might just get you killed, because people don't like this card. Because every time they untap, they start milling. People like to play lots of lands. Those cause mill triggers. This will make you a target, but if you drop this at the right time, you can just get threats in everyone's graveyard that you can go ahead and bring back.
You a zombie.
And turn around on them. Now with the enchantments, the two that I really want to point out are Fraying Sanity and Psychic Corrosion. These are really powerful mill cards. Now, Fraying Sanity unfortunately targets, but the thing is with this type of deck, you don't want to mill everyone out. You don't want to mill them to lose, you just want to get big threats. So you pick that big stompy player at the table and put Fraying Sanity onto them, so that way they mill their ridiculous overpowered cards like Avacyn and whatever it is that they want to go ahead and play, so you can go ahead and get it back.
You a zombie.
Yeah, Fraying Sanity is very good in this deck. It's not great in mill decks where mill is the win con, but in this case, I like it a lot. And then Psychic Corrosion is just ridiculous in any sort of mill carrying strategy at all. Every time you draw, everyone's milling too, and we're playing blue, so we draw plenty. This is a really powerful card that can actually mill the table out in certain circumstances. So these two are staples in here, and not quite as threatening as the Mesmeric Orb I talked about, but they still get the job done, so in that case they're actually better. They tend to keep a lower profile. Now Training Grounds is in here and is an incredibly powerful card in the deck, but it is crazy expensive. So to be honest, kind of just wait for the reprint for that one. It's good, it's really powerful, but to be honest, the way this deck is going to run, we're not trying to like reanimate everyone's graveyards at once with the Scarab God. We're picking and choosing.
You a zombie.
So if you can't put the card in there, it's really not a big deal. Yeah, I would wait on the reprint for this one, but when you do get it, definitely slot it in. Looking at the instance, removal, it's basically counter spells and removal, and this deck has a lot of that. And it's not typically the way I like to build decks, but again, with the Scarab God, even not going the zombie tribal direction can be very threatening and very scary. This is the type of deck where you want a lot of counter spells and those type of things just to protect yourself. This is not the type of deck where you want to be countering everybody else's stuff and make yourself more of a threat. You need to use them defensively, and a lot of the cards in here are going to do great jobs of that, especially something like a Disallow or something where you get around abilities. It's important in this deck. I wouldn't use them aggressively. I would use them much more in a defensive way. My two favorite cards in this slot though are one, Sinister Sabotage, which is a counterspell, but it lets you surveil. Anytime we can get our strategy going with just our whatever we want to do, this is great. We can sit there, counter what's trying to kill our commander, and mill in the process. Like I said, we're not necessarily looking for our creatures all the time, but there are some creatures that we might just want to reanimate because it's a little cheaper to do so. So the synergy on this card is great, and there's a cool promo version that is beautiful as well. And the last one, probably the most important instant in the deck that I want this in every deck with black, is Sudden Spoiling. This card is just so broken. The fact it has Split Second, it just basically just destroys whatever somebody has going on because all their creatures lose all their abilities. This is just an amazing card to have in any situation to feel safe. And I love this because, like I said, we're running a lot of defensive counter spells, and I'm not a huge counter spell fan, but something like this, you're not ward wiping them. You're not getting rid of all their stuff. What you're doing is when they try to kill you, you're stopping them from doing that and let the whole table realize who the threat is, and you're just saving them for a little bit. This is a great card, can be used really well politically. Love it. If I could, I'd put it in every black deck. It is amazing. Now the sorceries might just have the most gas of all the categories. These sorceries are ridiculous. So many incredibly powerful cards in this category. I mentioned zombie token production, although we weren't going zombie tribal, and some of the biggest ones are in here. Something like an Army of the Damned or Dread Summons. Oh my gosh, Dread Summons. These are just insane. These are doing exactly what we want. The Army of the Damned is great just because you get so many zombies. It's a great situation to kind of finish people off late game if no one has an answer for it, because you can just drain everybody for their 13 life. But Dread Summons is so good because we get to mill everyone and get zombies. It's everything we can want. It's essentially Scarab God the card as far as synergies go. It's an incredibly powerful card, and especially late game when we can produce a decent amount of mana, this is something that can really just kind of be a finishing blow. We can create a bunch of zombies and just fill the other big people's graveyards with big targets for us to bring back.
You a zombie.
Speaking of getting big targets, we want to be able to slot these effects into other categories. So something like a Life's Finale is just too perfect. We want board wipes in every deck. Board wipes are great for us in this case because we can also reanimate things. But with Life's Finale, we get to board wipe, but then we get to go through someone's deck, pick the 3 scariest creatures, throw them into the graveyard, and have immediate access to them. This might be the single best card in the deck because it is just it's so powerful, because basically even if our commander's on board, we can just board wipe. Our commander's gonna die, we can get it back immediately, and then immediately go through the scariest deck and pick the scariest creatures. Cards like this will have people wanting to exile their own graveyard to stop you from doing stuff. This is a complete all-star in the deck, and basically probably my favorite card to play in it. People just don't know how to react when you're going through and essentially briberying them 3 times while you're doing a board wipe. The card is crazy busted in this deck. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about right here is a very powerful card. Again, might make you threat number 1 to somebody, so think about that, but it is Traumatize. Now, Life's Finale I just talked about is one of those like tactical things. You're going to pick the scariest deck. Go ahead, start looking through the deck. I want this, throw them all in the graveyard. But let's say you're just trying to relax a little bit. Might have had a little drink or two, kind of just relaxing for the night. You don't want to think too much. You don't want to be all tactical. You know what? We want to play Traumatize instead and just mill half of a library. No thinking involved. Just let them flip half their library and just go, that looks scary.
You a zombie.
I'm just going to take that. I'm not going to worry about the particulars. First scary thing I see, I'm going to take. It's really cool to have both in the deck to have the flexibility, but again, this can make you scary. So think about that first. Make sure you have the resources to back it up, because that player is going to be coming after you. Now with the lands, it's 2 colors, and I always say this about 2-color mana bases. Tons of flexibility. Just throw basics in, really, if you want them. It can be a very, very cheap mana base. If you look at the one I have built, it's kind of optimized. It has a lot of the different duels you have available, things like that, but it's not really important. Literally, if you threw all basics in this deck, it would work just fine. A couple effects we would really like, though, is either going to be a high market or a Phyrexian Tower, whichever one you have access to, because it is a sack outlet, and I mentioned how important sack outlets are, so being able to get one on the land is kind of important. So one of those 2 in the deck just does a lot of work to make sure you don't have to pay commander tax. And the last land that I think is pretty important is going to be Gyro Reach Sanitarium. This whole group loot deal is pretty awesome, because if you think about it, no one wants to discard their big scary creatures because they know you can steal them.
You a zombie.
Meaning they're going to discard everything else. They're going to be discarding their lands, maybe missing land drops, might be discarding their removal. A lot of the times, at least when I have to loot early in a game, I'm getting rid of the 8-drop I have in my hand because I know I'm not going to be able to cast it forever. But when they're playing you, they don't want to do that, and it makes your opponents make some weird decisions. And I really do think Gyro Reach is going to be sort of an all-star in the deck. It can really either get you access to scary things or make people make poor decisions on what to discard. So that is going to do it for all the categories in this deck. Now let's get to the best part, the most exciting part, the game-winning step. How are we about to win the game with this deck? And there are some fun ways to do it. We actually have quite a few for this deck. So the first one is going to be very simple. It's Rise of the Dark Realms. This card is really powerful in any deck, even if you're just using it with attrition. So basically, with just creatures dying normally over the course of the game, you play this late game, a lot of times you'll still just win. But in a deck like this, where we're trying to mill everyone, including ourselves, bringing everything back is just game ending, completely game ending. It's a really, really powerful card. It finally got a reprint. I'm hoping that helps the price a little bit because I kind of want this for more than one deck. But it is just an incredible card, not surprising at all, but in this type of deck, kind of a necessary game ender. Now the second way to win the game is going to be zombies. I know I said it's not zombie tribal, but I really like the way I use zombies in this deck, and it's because it's a little sneakier than the typical Scarab God deck. Typically Scarab God wants to flood the board with zombies and drain everybody out, and then you can reanimate other targets in the process. But the thing is, people in that case are very, very cognizant of exactly the number of zombies you have. They're very aware of the fact that that can kill them. In this deck, people are so worried about what you're reanimating, and because you're milling it, oh, what's he going to take this turn? What's he going to take that turn? Most times you might only have 2-3 zombies out at a time because they're the eternalized cards, that people are only taking a little bit of life loss, and it's not something they're really thinking about. They're more worried about the threats you're bringing back. But if all of a sudden you can Army of the Damned or Dread Summons and just flood the board with zombies, all of a sudden out of nowhere it's another threat they have to deal with they weren't thinking about, and it might not be something they were preparing for properly. So I really do think that sneaky out of nowhere zombies to drain people out is a great way to take out somebody in this deck. Now the third way to win the game is going to be with mill. Now mill is not a great primary way to win the game in this deck. You don't want to be trying to mill the whole table out as a win con, but we have enough powerful mill effects that it's really not hard to take somebody out. I mean, we have the whole traumatized, fraying sanity thing if you don't mind losing a couple friends. That's a really powerful effect. You can basically just take somebody out of a game. But even just with Psychic Corrosion or Consuming Aberration or all the other effects that we have, even the Dreamborn views, so many different effects that people just through the course of a game draw so many cards in Commander nowadays. These are enough to really mess people's plans up. So I do think this is a great backup win con to have. And the best part is it doesn't even involve your commander. So if people start having answers for the Scarab God, this is a great backup way to come in and finish the game. Now the fourth way to win the game is very hard to describe because you don't know what it's going to be. It's going to depend on what goes in people's graveyards. And the fourth way is using the Scarab God. Obviously, you can't forget about the Scarab God and the win cons. And it's basically going to be picking and choosing the biggest threats.
You a zombie.
And creating awesome synergies from the creatures you're stealing. You don't know what it's going to be game to game. It's going to be completely dependent on what your opponents play. That's part of the fun of this deck, is every game it's going to change. That strategy is going to change depending on what creatures you get to steal. And the best part is they automatically synergize. As you eternalize things, you get zombie tokens of them. So you're getting zombies. You can then scry into the other cards you need. And that's why I love the Scarab God so much, because every game is going to be different while still having a consistent engine. And especially with this build, you really never know how you're going to win. And that is going to do it for this week's deck tech. I really, really hope y'all enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much personally that I'm actually building this deck in paper. As we speak, the pieces should be here hopefully in the next few weeks. It is just such an awesome deck, and I really love how versatile it can be. Really, depending on the decks you play against, you never know how it's going to play out. And as someone who loves Villainous Well so much, it's something I really, really appreciate about the deck. Y'all let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite build of the Scarab God? Do you like the zombie tribal build? Do you like the whole secret commander where you throw it into another deck? Do you like having it as this weird control mill reanimation thing that I have going on? Whatever your favorite is, let me know. I'd love to hear what y'all think. Huge shout out to all the patrons. We do always love and appreciate y'all so much. We've had so much growth on the channel lately. It has been crazy. I mean, it's just been insane. We really, really do appreciate all the love.
Nice.
We're going to have so much crazy stuff coming, so much content to come, especially with Double Masters. Like I said, plenty of decks that I've been waiting to build for a while, some crazy brews, and some of our personal decks coming up as well. So much exciting stuff to come. But until then, I will see y'all next time.